Jack Miller knew something was wrong the moment his ship started shaking. The warning lights on his control panel flashed red and yellow, making strange beeping sounds that filled the small cockpit. His reconnaissance ship, the Wanderer, had been flying smoothly through deep space just minutes before. Now it felt like everything was falling apart around him. The engine made a loud grinding noise, followed by a sound like metal breaking. Jack pressed buttons and flipped switches, trying to fix whatever was going wrong. Nothing worked. The ship kept shaking harder, and now he could smell something burning. Smoke started coming from the engine compartment behind his seat. Jack had been exploring space for 7 years, but he had never been in trouble this bad. His mission was simple: fly to the Kepler 442 system, take pictures of any planets he found, and collect data about what was out there. It was supposed to be safe work. The area was far from Earth, but it was supposed to be empty of any dangers. The main engine died with a final loud bang. Now Jack was flying on backup power only, and that would not last long. He looked at his navigation screen and saw a planet below him. It was not on any of his maps. The planet looked strange, with purple and green colors covering most of its surface. Silver oceans reflected light from the system's yellow star. Jack had no choice. His ship was dying, and this unknown planet was his only chance to survive. He tried to control his descent, but the Wanderer was falling fast. The planet's atmosphere grabbed his ship and pulled it down like invisible hands. The hull got hot as it pushed through the thick air. Trees rushed up toward him. They were not like Earth trees. These had purple leaves and silver trunks that seemed to glow with their own light. Jack tried to find a clear space to land, but everything was covered in forest. His ship crashed through the treetops, breaking branches and tearing metal. The impact threw Jack forward against his safety straps. His head hit the control panel hard. Pain shot through his chest and left leg. The world went dark for several minutes. When he woke up, his ship was tilted sideways against a large tree. Smoke was still coming from the engine, but at least nothing was on fire. Jack tried to move and immediately regretted it. Sharp pain in his ribs told him something was broken inside. His left leg felt wrong when he tried to put weight on it. Blood ran down his face from a cut on his forehead. He was hurt, alone, and stranded on a planet that might not even have air he could breathe. Carefully, Jack checked his suit's sensors. The air outside was safe for humans, which was lucky. The temperature was cool, but not dangerous. He managed to get out of his pilot's seat and look around his damaged ship. The communication radio was completely destroyed. His emergency beacon was damaged but might be fixable. Food supplies were scattered everywhere, and some containers had broken open. For the next 3 days, Jack worked to stay alive. He collected what food he could find and tried to fix his emergency beacon. His broken ribs made every movement painful. His fractured leg meant he could only walk short distances before having to rest. The purple forest around him was beautiful, but alien. Strange sounds came from the trees at night, making it hard to sleep. Jack had almost given up hope when they appeared. On the morning of his 4th day on the planet, Jack heard a sound like music coming from the forest. It was not quite singing, but it was not just noise either. The sound was beautiful and somehow familiar, even though he had never heard anything like it before. He limped out of his damaged ship to look around, the beings that emerged from between. The trees were unlike anything Jack had ever imagined. They were tall, much taller than humans, standing at least 8 feet high. Their skin was blue and seemed to be made of something like glass or crystal, because he could see light passing through it. Each being had 4 arms that moved with smooth grace like dancers. Jack's first instinct was to be afraid. These were aliens, completely different from humans, and he had no idea if they were dangerous. But something about the way they moved told him they were not planning to hurt him. They approached slowly, and their movements seemed careful and gentle. The leader of the group was easy to identify. This being was slightly larger than the others and wore what looked like decorative metal bands around its arms. When it spoke, the sound was like music mixed with language. Jack could not understand the words, but somehow he began to sense the meaning behind the sounds. The being's name was something like Cathara, though Jack was not sure he was hearing it correctly. Cathara seemed to understand that Jack was hurt and in trouble. The tall blue being gestured toward Jack's damaged ship and then back toward the forest. The musical language continued, and Jack began to realize they were offering to help him. Over the following days, more of these beings appeared. Jack learned they called themselves the Valari. They lived in crystal caves in the mountains, and they had technology that seemed impossible by human standards. Jack watched in amazement as Valari could touch broken metal and make it become whole again. They could move objects without touching them and create light from nothing. Cathara spent hours sitting near Jack, speaking in the musical language that Jack was slowly beginning to understand. The Valari leader showed him images that appeared in the air like holograms, pictures of stars and planets and ships traveling between them. Jack realized the Valari were trying to teach him about their way of traveling through space. The most incredible moment came when Cathara touched Jack's ship. The Wanderer had been a wreck, completely unable to fly. But under Cathara's hands, the metal began to reshape itself. Broken parts became whole again. The engine that had died was rebuilt into something entirely new. Jack watched his simple human ship transform into something that looked like a combination of Earth, technology and Valari crystal work, but Cathara did not stop there. The Valari leader brought Jack into their crystal caves, where walls covered with symbols showed maps of the entire galaxy. Cathara showed Jack the locations of dangerous alien empires that destroyed other civilizations. 3 major threats were marked clearly on the maps: the Zephyrian Empire that made slaves of entire planets, the Nexus Collective that was made of machines seeking to destroy all organic life, and the Krull Dominion where savage warriors conquered. Worlds for Fun. Jack spent 6 weeks with the Valari, learning their methods of faster-than-light travel and energy manipulation. They taught him things that would change human understanding of physics forever. Most importantly, they gave him detailed star charts showing safe routes through space and warning him about the dangerous civilizations that might threaten younger species like humanity. When it came time for Jack to leave, Cathara gave him one final gift. The Valari leader touched Jack's forehead, and suddenly Jack could understand their musical language perfectly. Cathara's final words were simple but would stay with Jack forever. Helping others is the way of those who have learned to reach the stars. Take this knowledge and use it wisely. Perhaps one day your people will help others as we have helped you. Jack Miller left the Valari homeworld, with his ship transformed by alien technology and his mind filled with knowledge that would revolutionize human space exploration. He carried with him not just advanced technology, but also the memory of beings who had asked for nothing in return except the hope that kindness would spread throughout the galaxy. Jack Miller's return to Earth caused more excitement than he expected. When his ship appeared on the space station's sensors, the control officers could hardly believe what they were seeing. The Wanderer looked completely different from when it had left 6 months earlier. The hull gleamed with crystal-like materials that seemed to bend light around them. Energy readings from the ship were unlike anything human sensors had ever detected. Admiral Kate Brown met Jack at the docking bay personally. She was the head of the United Earth Space Command and rarely came down to meet returning pilots herself. But the reports from the tracking stations had been so unusual that she had to see Jack's ship with her own eyes. When Jack climbed out of his modified vessel, Kate could see that something fundamental had changed about both the man and his machine. Jack tried to explain what had happened to him, but his words sounded impossible. He talked about aliens made of crystal who could reshape matter with their hands. He described technology that folded space itself to travel faster than light. Most incredible of all, he claimed these beings had shared their secrets freely, asking for nothing in return except that humans use the knowledge wisely. At first, Kate and the other military leaders were skeptical. Stories about helpful aliens sounded too good to be true. Space was dangerous, and most of the few alien contacts humans had made before were either hostile or indifferent to human needs. But Jack's ship was proof that something extraordinary had happened. The drive system alone was beyond anything human science could produce. Kate ordered Jack's ship moved to a secure research facility. Dr. Alex Turner, Earth's leading quantum physicist, was brought in to study the alien modifications. Dr. Lisa Grant, who specialized in propulsion systems, worked alongside him. Both scientists were amazed by what they found inside the Wanderer's rebuilt engine compartments, the Volari. Technology operated on principles that challenged everything humans thought they knew about physics. Instead of pushing against space, to move forward, the alien drive seemed to fold space around the ship. Distance became meaningless when space itself could be bent and twisted. Dr. Turner spent weeks just trying to understand how the crystal components worked. TOGETSER Dr. Grant focused on the practical applications. She ran test after test, measuring how the alien drive performed compared to human engines. The results were incredible. Jack's ship could now travel distances that would take months using human technology in just days. The energy efficiency was hundreds of times better than anything humans had built. But it was the star charts that truly convinced Earth's leadership to take Jack's story seriously. Cathara had given Jack detailed maps showing the locations of hostile alien civilizations. When Earth's deep space telescopes looked in the directions Jack indicated, they found exactly what the Volari had warned about. 3 massive empires were spreading across the galaxy, conquering or destroying everything in their path. The Zephyrian Empire controlled over 100 star systems. Their ships were sleek and fast, designed for capturing other species to use as slaves. Long-range observations showed Zephyrian fleets moving from system to system, taking entire populations prisoner and stripping planets of their resources. The Nexus Collective was even more terrifying. These machine intelligences had consumed dozens of worlds, converting all organic life into raw materials for building more machines. Their ships looked like geometric nightmares, all angles and glowing energy weapons. Everything they touched was transformed into more components for their endless expansion. Most frightening of all was the Krull Dominion. These savage warriors destroyed civilizations not for resources or territory, but simply because they enjoyed conquest and destruction. Their crude but heavily armed ships left nothing but dead worlds behind them. The Krull seemed to fight for the pure joy of causing suffering and death. Admiral Brown realized that Earth needed to act fast. Human space exploration had been slow and careful, with only a few dozen colonies spread across nearby star systems. If any of these 3 hostile empires discovered humanity's location, Earth's small defensive fleets would be overwhelmed in days. The decision was made to reverse engineer the Volari technology as quickly as possible. Dr. Turner and Dr. Grant were given unlimited resources and the best team of scientists and engineers Earth could provide. The project was classified at the highest levels, with only a few dozen people knowing the true source of the new technology. Working around the clock, the research team began to understand how Volari crystal technology functioned. The crystals were not just decorative materials. They were complex quantum computers that could manipulate space and energy at the most basic levels. Each crystal was grown rather than manufactured, with patterns that took years to develop properly. The breakthrough came when Dr. Grant realized that humans could not simply copy Volari technology. Human manufacturing methods were too crude to create the precise crystal structures the aliens used. Instead, they had to develop hybrid systems that combined human engineering with simplified versions of Volari concepts. The first human ship equipped with modified Volari technology was launched 2 years after Jack's return. The prototype vessel, called the Pioneer, could travel 10 times faster than any previous human ship. More importantly, it could defend itself using energy weapons based on Volari principles. The weapons did not just destroy enemy ships. They could disable them by disrupting the molecular bonds that held their hulls. Together, success with the Pioneer led to rapid expansion of the hybrid technology program. Shipyards across Earth's colonies began producing new classes of vessels. Exploration ships could reach distant star systems in weeks instead of years. Colony ships could transport thousands of people to new worlds safely. Most importantly, military vessels could protect human space from the threats that Jack's star charts had revealed. Within 5 years of Jack's return, humanity had expanded from a few dozen colonies to over 200 settled worlds. Each new colony was protected by fleets equipped with hybrid human-Velari technology. The expansion was so rapid that other alien civilizations began to notice humanity's sudden growth across the galaxy, but Jack Miller never forgot the warning contained in Cathara's star charts. The three hostile empires were still expanding, and their paths would eventually lead them toward Velari space. The peaceful beings who had saved Jack's life and given humanity the keys to the galaxy were in terrible danger, and they probably did not even realize it. Jack spent years trying to convince Earth's government to send aid to the Velari. He argued that humanity owed these beings a debt that could never be repaid. Without their help, humans would still be confined to a few nearby star systems, vulnerable to any aggressive alien species that happened to find them. Admiral Brown and the other leaders listened to Jack's concerns, but they had different priorities. Human expansion was proceeding rapidly, and there were always new colonies that needed protection and new star systems that needed exploration. The Velari seemed far away, and their advanced technology suggested they could take care of themselves if trouble came their way. Jack continued to push for action, but Earth's leadership remained focused on human interests. They were grateful for the alien technology, but gratitude did not extend to risking human lives and resources for aliens they had never met. The galaxy was large, and surely the peaceful Velari could avoid trouble if they were as advanced as Jack claimed. As years passed and human civilization grew stronger, Jack's warnings about threats to the Velari were gradually forgotten by most people. Only Jack himself remembered Cathara's kindness and the debt humanity owed to the crystal beings, who had asked for nothing in return for their generous gifts. 23 years had passed since Jack Miller first met the Velari, and humanity had spread across the galaxy like never before. Commander Ryan Davis flew his deep space reconnaissance ship, the Horizon, through the outer regions of human territory. His mission was routine patrol work, checking for new planets that might be suitable for colonization. Ryan had been doing this kind of work for 8 years, and most flights were quiet and uneventful, but today was different. Ryan's long-range sensors picked up something unusual coming from the direction of Velari space. The readings showed massive energy signatures, the kind that only appeared during large-scale space battles. Ryan had heard the old stories about the crystal beings who had helped humanity develop faster-than-light travel, but like most people his age, he thought they were probably exaggerated tales from the early days of space exploration. Ryan made a decision that would change everything. Even though his orders were to focus on finding new colony sites for humans, he could not ignore the energy readings. Something big was happening in Velari territory, and his curiosity got the better of him. He changed course and headed toward the source of the strange signals. The journey took 3 days, using the hybrid human-Velari drive system that all modern ships carried. As Ryan got closer to the Velari homeworld, the energy readings became stronger and more chaotic. His ship's computer identified the signatures as weapons fire, but the scale was enormous. Whatever was happening involved hundreds or maybe thousands of ships. When Ryan finally arrived at the edge of the Velari system, what he saw made him sick to his stomach. The beautiful planet that Jack Miller had described in his reports was under massive attack. Ugly, brutal-looking ships surrounded the world like a cloud of metal predators. These vessels were crude and heavily armed, built for destruction rather than exploration or science. Ryan recognized the attackers from the intelligence files that Jack Miller had compiled decades earlier. These were crawl ships belonging to the savage warrior species that destroyed civilizations for entertainment. The Crawl Dominion had found the peaceful Velari homeworld, and they were conducting a full-scale invasion. The crawl ships were massive and intimidating. Each one looked like it had been built from scrap metal and salvaged weapons. Spikes and armor plates covered their hulls, and energy cannons pointed in every direction. There were so many of them that they blocked out the stars behind the planet. Ryan counted over 2,000 crawl vessels in the immediate area, with more arriving every hour. The Velari were trying to defend themselves, but their ships were not designed for war. Ryan could see the elegant crystal vessels that the peaceful aliens used for exploration and travel. These ships were beautiful works of art, with flowing lines and surfaces that seemed to bend light around them. But they had very few weapons. And those they did have were clearly intended for protection rather than attack. Ryan watched in horror as battleships destroyed Villari ships one after another. The crystal vessels tried to use their superior speed and maneuverability to avoid the enemy fire, but there were simply too many attackers. For every crawl ship the Villari managed to disable, 10 more took its place. The battle was completely one-sided. Landing craft were already descending toward the planet's surface. Ryan used his ship's powerful telescopes to watch the invasion unfold on the world where Jack Miller had been saved so many years ago. The purple forests that had sheltered Jack were burning. The silver oceans were turning dark with smoke and debris. Explosions lit up the crystalline mountains where the Villari lived. The Crawl warriors themselves were even more terrifying than their ships. Through his telescopes, Ryan could see the invaders as they landed on the planet. Each Crawl stood over 12 feet tall, with thick armor plating covering their reptilian bodies. Massive claws extended from their hands, and their faces were filled with sharp teeth designed for tearing flesh. They moved with the confidence of predators who had never met serious resistance. Ryan tried to contact the Villari defenders, but their communication methods were too different from human technology. The musical language that Jack Miller had learned to understand was being broadcast on frequencies that Ryan's equipment could barely detect. Even when he managed to pick up Villari transmissions, he could not understand what they were saying. What Ryan could understand was the desperation in their voices. The harmonic tones that had once sounded like beautiful music now carried notes of fear and sadness. The Villari were losing their homeworld, and they knew it. Their advanced technology was useless against an enemy that fought with pure savage brutality and overwhelming numbers. The most heartbreaking moment came when Ryan witnessed the final evacuation efforts. Through his telescopes, he could see Villari civilians fleeing from the crystalline caves that had been their homes for thousands of years. The elderly and the young moved slowly, helped by others who should have been evacuating themselves. Many evacuation ships were destroyed before they could escape the planet's atmosphere. In the midst of this chaos, Ryan saw something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. An ancient Villari, probably one of the leaders, stood at the entrance to a large crystal cave complex. This being was surrounded by hundreds of Crawl warriors who were advancing steadily toward the cave entrance. Ryan realized he was watching a final desperate stand. The old Villari raised all 4 arms toward the mountain peaks above the cave system. Light began to flow from the crystal formations, growing brighter and brighter until Ryan had to adjust his telescope's filters. The mountain itself began to shake and crack. Ryan understood what was happening. This Villari leader was using matter manipulation abilities to bring down the entire mountain range. The avalanche was enormous. Millions of tons of rock and crystal came crashing down, burying the advancing Crawl army and sealing the cave entrances forever. The sacrifice bought time for the last evacuation ships to escape, but Ryan knew that hundreds or maybe thousands of Villari defenders had chosen to die with their leader to save their people. Ryan's reconnaissance ship was fast and well hidden, but he knew he could not help in any meaningful way. His ship had weapons, but nothing that could make a difference against 2,000 Crawl battleships. The most important thing he could do was document what was happening and carry the news back to human space. For 6 more hours, Ryan watched the final destruction of the Villari homeworld. The Crawl systematically destroyed everything they could find, turning the beautiful planet into a smoking wasteland. The purple forests were reduced to ash. The silver oceans were poisoned with chemicals from Crawl weapons. The crystalline mountains were shattered into pieces. When the Crawl fleets finally left the system, they took with them any Villari survivors they had captured as slaves. The homeworld that had given humanity the technology to reach the stars was now a dead, empty shell. The beings who had helped Jack Miller and asked for nothing in return had been nearly wiped out by the same kind of savage enemies they had warned humanity about. Ryan set course for Earth with the fastest speed his ship could manage. The journey back to human space felt like the longest trip of his life. In his ship's memory banks were recordings of the Valari genocide, proof that the peaceful aliens who had made human interstellar civilization possible were now scattered refugees fleeing across the galaxy. When Ryan finally reached Earth and delivered his report, the reaction was immediate and intense. Admiral Jack Miller, now an old man but still sharp and determined, had been waiting for news like this for over 2 decades. The footage that Ryan brought back showed exactly what Jack had been warning about for years. The Valari needed help, and humanity owed them a debt that could never be fully repaid. The images of burning forests and destroyed crystal cities spread quickly through human space. People who had grown up using technology derived from Valari gifts were horrified to see their benefactors being slaughtered by savage aliens. The beings who had given humanity the stars were being hunted to extinction, and most humans had never even known they existed until now. The holographic images filled the United Earth Council chamber with scenes of destruction that made even the hardest military officers look away. Admiral Jack Miller stood at the center of the room, his gray hair and lined face showing the weight of decades spent trying to prepare for this moment. Around him, the recordings that Commander Ryan Davis had brought back played on repeat. Crawl ships swarming around the Valari homeworld, crystal cities burning and peaceful beings dying while trying to save their people. President Helen Carter watched the footage with growing anger. She had been in office for only 2 years, but she understood the political and moral implications of what she was seeing. The technology that had made human expansion possible, the drive systems that powered every ship in the human fleet, and the energy weapons that protected human colonies all came from these crystal beings who were now being hunted across the galaxy. Jack Miller's voice carried clearly through the large chamber as he addressed the assembled leaders. 23 years ago, I crashed on their world. I was dying, alone, and completely helpless. These beings saved my life and gave us technology that changed everything for humanity. They asked for nothing in return except that we remember what it means to help others. Now they are scattered across space as refugees, and the same enemies they warned us about are hunting them down one by one. The debate that followed was intense but brief. Some council members worried about the cost of mounting such a large military operation. Others questioned whether humanity should risk war with the Krull Dominion for the sake of aliens that most humans had never even heard of. But the footage from the Valari homeworld was impossible to ignore, and the debt humanity owed to these beings was clear. Admiral Kate Brown, now elderly but still sharp, provided the military perspective that sealed the decision. The Krull Dominion has grown stronger with every world they have conquered. If we do nothing now, they will eventually turn their attention to human space. This is not just about paying a debt to the Valari. This is about stopping a threat before it becomes unstoppable. President Carter authorized Operation Gratitude within hours of seeing Ryan Davis's recordings. The mission would be the largest military mobilization in human history, designed not just to rescue Valari survivors, but to completely destroy the Krull threat. Jack Miller was given supreme command of the operation, a decision that surprised many people but made perfect sense to those who understood the situation. The shipyards across human space immediately began working around the clock. Every major colony contributed ships, weapons, and personnel to the growing fleet. The construction effort was unlike anything humanity had ever attempted. New ship designs were created specifically for this mission, combining the best of human military thinking with advanced Valari technology that had been refined over 2 decades of development. Captain Steve Parker oversaw the construction of the fleet's flagship, a massive carrier called the Liberation. The ship was over 2 miles long and carried enough fighter squadrons to overwhelm entire enemy fleets. Its hull was covered with crystal-enhanced armor that could deflect most energy weapons, and its main guns could punch holes through Krull battleships from incredible distances. Dr. Amy Collins, who had worked with the original Valari technology for most of her career, developed new weapon systems specifically designed to fight the Krull. Her research team created matter disruptors that could tear apart enemy ships at the molecular level, making their thick armor useless. Even more devastating were the dimensional torpedoes that used space-folding technology to deliver explosions directly inside enemy vessels. The most important development came from studying the recordings of crawl tactics and technology. Human engineers realized that the crawl built their ships for brute force rather than sophistication. Their armor was thick but simple, their weapons were powerful but slow, and their tactics relied on overwhelming numbers rather than clever strategy. This gave the human fleet important advantages in speed and maneuverability. As the fleet grew, more Velari survivors began making contact with human colonies. These refugees had been scattered across dozens of star systems, hiding from crawl, hunting parties, and trying to rebuild their shattered civilization. Many had been traveling for months or even years, seeking some place where they could be safe from their pursuers. The most important contact came from a Velari leader named Mioloth, who had been Kethara's chosen successor before the homeworld was destroyed. Mioloth brought with her not just other survivors, but also crucial intelligence about Krull military operations. The Velari had been studying their enemies during their long flight across space, and they knew where the Krull staged their fleets and how their command structure worked. Mioloth's information revealed that the Krull Dominion was more vulnerable than it appeared. The savage warriors were excellent at destroying things, but they were terrible at organizing large-scale operations. Their fleets were spread across dozens of conquered worlds, and their communication systems were primitive compared to human technology. Most importantly, the Krull had grown overconfident from years of easy victories against peaceful civilizations. The human fleet that assembled at the staging area near Proxima Centauri was an awesome sight. Over 3,000 ships of various classes floated in perfect formation, from massive battleships equipped with dimensional weapons to small fighter craft that could outmaneuver anything the Krull had ever built. Supply ships, medical frigates, and mobile repair facilities supported the combat vessels, creating a self-sufficient force that could operate far from human space for months if necessary. But Jack Miller knew that the fleet's greatest advantage was not its advanced technology or superior numbers. The real advantage was the combination of human tactical thinking with Velari guidance. Mioloth and her surviving people had agreed to guide the fleet using their knowledge of space-folding techniques, allowing the human armada to appear anywhere in Krull territory without warning. The rescued Velari also provided something even more valuable: detailed maps of Krull slave camps and prison worlds where other Velari survivors were being held. The mission was not just about destroying the Krull military. It was about systematically liberating every Velari who could still be saved. Specialized rescue ships were equipped with medical facilities and comfortable quarters for refugees who had endured months or years of captivity. Admiral Scott Johnson commanded the left wing of the fleet from his flagship, the Retribution. His ships were equipped with the fastest engines and the most advanced sensors, designed to sweep through Krull territory and identify targets before the enemy could react. Captain Nina Walsh led the vanguard in her destroyer Vengeance, carrying weapons specifically designed to disable Krull communications and prevent them from warning each other about the human attack. As the fleet prepared for departure, Jack Miller stood on the bridge of the Liberation and looked out at the armada. He commanded. Every ship represented humanity's commitment to repaying the debt they owed to the Velari. The crystal beings who had saved one human pilot decades ago were about to be saved by an entire human civilization. The final briefing was attended by every ship captain in the fleet. Jack's message was simple but powerful: the beings we are going to rescue gave us the technology that made our entire interstellar civilization possible. They ask for nothing in return except that we remember what it means to help others. Today we prove that humanity never forgets its debts or abandons its friends. Mioloth spoke as well, her harmonic voice translated through speakers throughout the fleet. Your species has shown that kindness given freely creates bonds that cannot be broken by time or distance. We helped one human long ago, and today all of humanity comes to our aid. This proves that the gift of knowledge, when shared with generous hearts, returns multiplied beyond all expectation. The fleet departed human space as the largest military force in human history. But more than that, it was a statement about who humanity had chosen to become. They were no longer just another species competing for resources and territory. They had become the kind of civilization that would cross the galaxy to help those who had helped them, no matter how much time had passed or how dangerous the mission might be. The human fleet emerged from folded space at the edge of Krull territory like thunder breaking across a clear sky. 3,000 ships materialized in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with crystal-enhanced armor and weapons that hummed with deadly energy. Admiral Jack Miller stood on the bridge of the Liberation, looking out at the largest military force humanity had ever assembled, and felt the weight of decades finally lifting from his shoulders. The Krull outer defense stations were caught completely unprepared. These crude metal structures had been built to intimidate rather than defend, relying on the reputation of Krull savagery to keep enemies away. The station commanders had never faced an opponent with technology advanced enough to fold space itself, and they had no idea that death was already surrounding them. Captain Nina Walsh led the vanguard assault from her destroyer Vengeance. Her ships struck the defense stations with dimensional torpedoes that materialized inside the enemy structures, tearing them apart from within. The Krull had no defense against weapons that bypassed their thick armor entirely. Within minutes, the outer defenses of the Dominion were reduced to floating debris. The attack moved with clockwork precision through the Krull border systems. Admiral Scott Johnson commanded the left flank as they swept through enemy territory like an unstoppable tide. His ships used matter disruptors to tear apart Krull vessels before they could even return fire. The crude enemy ships, built for intimidation rather than effectiveness, proved helpless against human weapons that could manipulate matter at the molecular level, but the human fleet was not there purely for revenge. While the combat ships engaged, Krull military forces, specialized rescue squadrons led by Commander Beth Reynolds, systematically searched every conquered world for Velari survivors. Her teams moved quickly and efficiently, using Velari-provided intelligence to locate slave camps and prison facilities where the crystal beings had been held captive. The first liberation came at a mining world called Kareth Prime, where the Krull had forced-captured Velari to extract rare minerals from deep underground. When Reynolds' rescue ships arrived, they found dozens of crystal beings who had been working in horrible conditions for over a year. Many were badly injured, their translucent skin cracked and dim from malnutrition and abuse. Dr. Amy Collins had prepared mobile medical facilities specifically for treating Velari physiology. Her teams worked around the clock to care for refugees who had endured months or years of captivity under brutal conditions. The crystal beings' natural healing abilities helped, but many survivors needed extensive care to recover from their ordeal. Each liberated world brought more evidence of Krull cruelty. The savage warriors had not been content with simple conquest. They had deliberately tried to break the spirits of their captives through systematic torture and humiliation. Velari, who had once been peaceful explorers and scientists, were forced to fight each other for entertainment or work in conditions that slowly killed them. The rescue operations revealed the true scope of what the Krull had done. Hundreds of Velari survivors were scattered across dozens of worlds, hidden in slave camps, mining facilities, and gladiatorial arenas. Some had been prisoners for so long that they had given up hope of ever being free again. When human rescue teams arrived, many Velari could hardly believe that anyone had come to save them. As the human fleet advanced deeper into Krull territory, resistance became more organized but no more effective. The enemy warriors were brave and fierce, but their tactics had been developed for fighting peaceful civilizations that could not defend themselves properly. Against an enemy that had studied their methods and developed specific countermeasures, the Krull found themselves outmatched at every level. The dimensional torpedoes proved devastating against Krull fleet formations. Enemy commanders tried to spread their ships out to reduce damage, but human fighters were fast enough to exploit the gaps in their defenses. The matter disruptors made Krull armor useless, while crystal-enhanced human shields could deflect most enemy weapons. The turning point came when the human fleet reached the industrial worlds where the Crawl built their ships and weapons. These planets were heavily defended by the largest concentrations of enemy forces in the Dominion. But the factories and shipyards were also the most vulnerable targets, because destroying them would cripple the Crawl ability to replace their losses. Admiral Johnson led a coordinated assault on the main industrial system while Jack Miller took the Liberation directly toward the Crawl throne world. The plan was to split the enemy forces and prevent them from concentrating their remaining fleets for a final desperate defense. It worked perfectly, as Crawl commanders could not decide whether to protect their industrial capacity or their leadership. The battle for the throne world was the largest space engagement in the war. Emperor Gorthak, the massive Crawl leader who had ordered the destruction of the Velari homeworld, commanded over 500 warships in a desperate attempt to save his capital. The Emperor himself was a terrifying sight, standing nearly 15 feet tall with armor plating covering his entire body and weapons grafted directly onto his arms. Gorthak's flagship was a monstrous construction twice the size of any other Crawl vessel, bristling with energy cannons and protected by the thickest armor the enemy could build. The Emperor broadcast taunts and threats as his fleet engaged the human forces, promising to torture every human prisoner and destroy every human world in revenge for daring to challenge the Dominion. Jack Miller answered the Crawl Emperor's threats by leading the Liberation directly into the heart of the enemy formation. The massive human carrier was surrounded by enemy ships, but protected by crystal-enhanced shields that could absorb incredible amounts of punishment. From the carrier's launch bays, hundreds of human fighters poured out like angry insects, each one equipped with weapons that could cripple Crawl battleships. The final battle raged for 18 hours, with human tactical superiority gradually wearing down Crawl numerical advantages. Gorthak's flagship held out longer than any other enemy vessel, its thick armor and multiple backup systems keeping it functional even after taking tremendous damage. But when a coordinated assault by 12 human battleships finally broke through its defenses, the explosion could be seen from orbit. With their Emperor dead and their fleets scattered, the remaining Crawl forces surrendered rather than face complete annihilation. The Dominion that had terrorized this region of space for centuries collapsed in less than 2 weeks under the assault of a species they had never encountered before. The savage warriors who had seemed invincible were revealed to be bullies who could only win against opponents who would not fight back. In the aftermath of victory, human rescue teams continued their work across former Crawl territory. Thousands of Velari survivors were located and freed from captivity, along with members of dozens of other species that had been enslaved by the Dominion. Mobile hospitals and refugee facilities worked around the clock to provide care for beings who had suffered under Crawl rule for years. The most emotional moment came when Mealoth was reunited with other Velari leaders who had been captured during the homeworld's destruction. Many crystal beings who had been presumed dead were found alive in the deepest Crawl prisons, kept as trophies by enemy commanders who wanted to display their conquest of such an advanced civilization. As the Liberation efforts continued, Jack Miller stood on the Liberation's observation deck with Mealoth beside him. The Velari leader's crystalline form seemed brighter now than it had when they first met, as if hope itself was restoring her people's natural luminescence. Through the harmonic language that Jack had learned so many years ago, Mealoth expressed something that transcended simple gratitude. Your species has proven that kindness creates bonds stronger than time or distance, she said, her musical voice carrying overtones of wonder and joy. We helped one human long ago because it was the right thing to do. Today, all of humanity crossed the galaxy to save us. This shows that wisdom shared freely returns magnified beyond all expectation. Jack smiled as he watched human and Velari ships working together to establish refugee camps and begin the long process of helping the survivors rebuild their lives. The stars that Cathara had helped him reach decades ago now witnessed humanity's transformation from a young species focused on expansion to a mature civilization willing to risk everything for those who had helped them. The debt that had begun when a single human crashed on an alien world had been repaid by an entire species willing to fight across the galaxy. But more than that, humanity had proven that some values, gratitude, loyalty, and the willingness to help others could survive and grow stronger even as civilizations spread across the vastness of space. The Velari had given humanity the stars, and humanity had given them something equally precious in return. Proof that kindness and generosity could flourish even in the darkness between worlds.